Good morning, everybody. Just a quick sound check. Want to make sure that everybody can hear us okay. My name is Eric. I work for the Department of Human Services for the Minnesota Child Welfare Training Academy and the Division of Child Safety and Permanency. We'll get started here in a little bit. Just a couple housekeeping details. The handouts for this session were emailed out about 20 minutes ago. So you should have them in an email. Always check your quarantine email. Sometimes our emails go there. Want to talk a little bit about how the webinar will be run this morning. If you have questions regarding the information that's being discussed, please use the Q&A function down in your menu bar down at the bottom of your screen instead of the chat. Heidi and I will do our due diligence to monitor both the Q&A and the chat, but please send your questions through the Q&A because then we can answer them directly through that Q&A and track. If you can't see that menu bar at the bottom of your screen, you just need to move your mouse to the bottom of the screen and it will appear. And again, we usually like to give it a minute or so before we get started to make sure everybody has logged in and everybody can hear. Also, we want to give you a chance to get a nice hot cup of coffee. That's why we call these coffee talks. We hold them in the morning, bright and early, at the beginning of your day when your brain is functioning the best with that initial cup of coffee. All right, it looks like we're holding steady down here at the participants. So we'll go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Eric Kratt and I work for the Minnesota Child Welfare Training Academy, and we have the pleasure of introducing you to another Coffee Talk series regarding the Minnesota Assessment of Parenting for Children and Youth, otherwise known as the MAPCY. Before we dig into the details of this presentation, we'll go ahead and introduce our panel of experts. I'm going to turn it over to Jody McElroy, who's our subject matter expert, policy expert guru, who's going to be guiding you through the worker side of this training today. So feel free, Jody.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay? And can you see the PowerPoint presentation? Because if you can't, I don't know how we're going to fix it. So this morning, we're going to talk about the policy pieces of the MAPCY assessment tool, why it came into be, how we're going to work through it in SSIS, how it's going to play with fiscal. So I'm going to touch more on the policy piece and then hand it over to Molly and Melissa so they can talk about the fiscal. Throw out questions as you have them. We'll try and answer them as they come in. If not, we'll hit them at the tail end of the presentation. But I will caution you, not caution you, I'll advise you that the most important slide in this presentation is the final one, because that's my contact information. So if any questions come up for you as mentors, whether it's fiscal or policy piece, throw them to me. Most often what we've been finding is that questions that are fielded to the help desk as it relates to the policy piece, if you run them through me first, most often we can get the matter resolved quicker, knowing that policy was behind any proposed setting back to draft or things like that. So here we go. Did it change slides? No, oh, goodness, people. Eric. Still didn't change. Okay.
Um,
What are we?
technology is always fun, so sit tight while we
Oh,
wake up the monitor here.
did it change?
Yep, there you go.
Ooh, okay. Here we go. So this morning for my portion, we're going to talk about the MAPCY, what it is. We're going to talk about the importance of loading a placement into SSIS. We're just going to touch on that because what's important about the placement piece is how it plays into the SSIS part of the MAPCY assessment. Then we'll talk briefly on the scoring and the benefits, and then just some miscellaneous things that might be helpful for you mentors to know as you're helping workers get through the process. So what is the MAPCY? It's the Minnesota Assessment of Parenting for Children and Youth, such as Eric explained, and that's the tool that we're going to use that's going to determine any monthly supplemental benefit amounts for any of our kids who are in foster care, or if they're going into a kinship assistance or adoption assistance with a Northstar Care for Children. The MAPCY came into being January 1st of 15 when we got rid of the difficulty of care assessment tool and we launched the MAPCY, and that's going to determine, like I said, the supplemental benefit. So when Northstar started in January of 15, there's 3 different benefits that are attached to that. The first one is the basic payment, and that's just set by a child's age, and that's to take care of the daily needs of our kids, kind of the eats and sheets, provides for food, clothing, the daily supervision of a kid. What the MAPCY is going to do is that's going to add additional benefits to that basic that's going to provide for the extra care and attention that a family's giving our kids, whether they're in foster care, kinship, or adoption. And then most of our kids will get medical assistance through the Northstar benefits, but however, that's not automatic for our non-Title 4E kinship assistant kids. So when do you need a MAPCY? Whenever you're going to have a service code within your service arrangements of 180 or 181, which is going to be our treatment foster care and our child family foster care, or a 188, which is our extended foster care supervised independent living, you're going to need a MAPCY. So if any of our kids are placed with a relative who has taken emergency placement, who are now in the process of getting licensed, any of our foster parents who are licensed by the county, a tribe, or a private agency. At this point, before Families First really kicks off, it's going to be for any of our children who are in corporate foster care, any of our youth who are in extended foster care, that 18 to 21-year-old, and then any of our children who are going to be adopted, who are under the guardianship of the commissioner, or any of those relative custodians who are moving into a transfer of permanent legal physical custody, the TPLPC. Note that the MAPCY does not need to be completed for any non-Northstar eligible settings, such as like a correctional facility, group homes, hospitalizations. So those will not have a MAPCY because most of those are covered either through medical assistance or a contract. So the next 2 slides are going to talk about what the process is. And most often, most of the responsibility for a MAPCY lies with the financially responsible agency, okay? However, when a child is placed, that responsibility is the legal responsible agency. They do that, they place the child in foster care. Financially responsible agency is going to enter that placement into SSIS, going to complete the MAPCY in collaboration with the child's team, which is now including the legally and the financially responsible agencies. They're going to enter the MAPCY into SSIS, and the MAPCY is going to be scored and the benefit level is going to be determined. And once that occurs, the assessor within that agency is going to send the MAPCY over to the approver so that can be approved. The approver is going to review and approve the MAPCY. And then once it's approved, they're going to send a written notice and a MAPCY rating report to the provider. And at that point, then service arrangements can be created and payments can be made. So within the MAPCY, there's different role assignments. It requires 2 roles within SSIS, which is going to be the assessor and an approver. These are instructions via SSIS folks as far as how to add a new role. I can honestly say I have never added a role, so I'm hoping that these instructions will not lead you astray and will help guide you into putting assessors and approvers within the SS admin's function, and you can create that. So since Heidi has sent that to you guys, I'll let you review that. An agency should have at least 1 assessor and 1 backup assessor. That way we don't get things that are clogging up when our kids are in care. We can get them their benefit levels as soon as we can. One thing to note is that You cannot assess and approve the same MAPCY. You can have both functions, but you cannot approve the MAPCY that you completed. Most often, a caseworker is going to be in the best position to complete the assessments because they know the child, but we do know that some of our agencies do have specialized assessors, and that's been working as well too. The role of the approver is important because, is that a ding dong? Someone's coming in? Okay. Want to ensure that MAPCYs are completed by the 30th date of a child's out-of-home placement. The MAPCY must be approved by an agency designated approver because SSIS will not pay that benefit amount established through the MAPCY until it is agency approved. And then also make note that only approved MAPCYs can be used for service arrangements and payments. So if you have a MAPCY that's not auto-filling into the service arrangement, go back and check and make sure that it's approved. Most often it's not going to be. It's going to be sitting either in draft status or pending agency approval. And then for our kiddos with the highest needs and extraordinary level, increase can be requested by the agency, and then those are submitted into DHS through the SSIS system, and then we review and approve those. So the role within approval and fiscal. So when you're approving a MAPCY, you want to check the following that are going to affect your service arrangements, your payments, and the child foster care claims. You want to double check the effective date of the MAPCY. If it's the initial MAPCY for that placement, the system is going to set that effective date based on the emergency benefit level rules, and we'll get to that in a little bit. And if it's not the first MAPCY, is the effective date the first of a month? Okay, we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. You also want to make sure that the correct placement has been selected. We see many instances with questions that are raised to the help desk where it's the service arrangement isn't filling in correctly because you picked the kid was with the Andersons, left and was placed with the Bensons and went back to the Andersons, and you may have chosen the very first Anderson placement when you're actually working on the second one. Wendy, at this point, we will not have the 18 to 21 pull into service arrangements because the benefit level for the extended foster care supervised independent living, those youth are the owners of their MAPCY, and we can split that payment out, that payment level out. So the youth can get some money, landlord can get some money, we can vendor that out differently. Within fiscal, you want to make sure that the service arrangement has been ended. And if the effective date is backdated, has a fiscal person in your agency been notified about that additional level? Payments may be needed if the level increased or if existing payments need to be split if the level decreases. And Molly and Melissa can talk to that a little further later. So for the MAPCY child and youth tools, the service arrangements and payments are for service codes 180 and 181. And with those, which relates to the question that Wendy just raised on the chat, is that basic per diem and supplementals based on the MAPCY will autofill upon approval based on the emergency level D rules. Do not override. These are three different kind of complicated screens. We were bound by statute to develop the system within SSIS regarding the emergency level D. It's available to agencies within the first 30 days of a child's continuous placement, but it doesn't have to be used. So there's three different examples I'm going to give you now based on these next three slides. So if the MAPCY is completed within or after the first 30 days and the amount is greater, the higher rate will go back to the first date of placement. So an example of this, child's placed January 1st, very first day out of home placement, continuous placement starts, placed January 1st. You go in and you do the MAPCY, let's say January 15th, and it gets approved, and the child scores a level F. That F, even though you put in the date January, got approved on the 15th, child was placed on January 1st, that level F is going to go back to January 1st. It's higher than the level D. Now the next slide, if the MAPCY is completed within the first 30 days and the amount is lower than the level D, the lower rate will become effective the date of the approval. SSIS is going to adjust the effective date automatically. Please do not try and override it. A lot of times that gets things very messy in your system, and it's a headache for the help desk to fix that. Example of this is child placed January 15th. You complete the MAPCY, it gets approved on January 15th, but the level goes to a B as in boy. That child will be entitled to get the level D the 1st through the 14th, and that level B will not pick up until the date of the approval, which is January 15th. Last example, if the MAPCY is completed after the 30th day of placement and it's lower than the level D, the lower amount is going to be paid effective the 31st date of placement. So sticking with the same example, child was placed January 1st. You got the MAPCY done, but it wasn't approved till February 15th at that lower level C, let's say. That child will be entitled to get the level D from January 1st through January 30th. And then on the 31st day of placement, it'll go down to that C. So January 31, the level C will take effect and continue ongoing. So the MAPCY and the Extended Foster Care Supervised Independent Living Placement and Payment. So youth in the EFC still, which I talked about a little bit before, they're the owners of the MAPCY. They receive the same benefits as if they were in foster care. And like I said, some funds might be paid directly to that youth, but some funds might be paid directly to vendors, whether it's phone or landlord or bus passes, things like that. So that's why we don't have that whole amount plunk in. Here's a question that just came across. Why do we have 30 days to do the MAPCY if the emergency level D will automatically given to the child until the MAPCY has been approved? When it passed in the legislature, which I'll remind you, I'm here to help you get through the tool. I didn't come up with any of these rules. The 30 days was built into statute to help give you time to get that MAPCY done. And then for those kiddos who are in that first 30 days of their continuous placement, we wanted to help support those emergency type placements as best we can while you guys went out and did those MAPCYs, okay? If you don't get it, so this is for the continuous placement. So let's say the kid was with the Andersons for 45 days. They got their emergency level D for 30. They got placed with the Bensons and you never got around to doing the MAPCY, let's say for another 45 days, that's going to auto default to a level B. So that emergency level D is only available one time for that first 30 days of the continuous placement. Not sure if I explained that correctly. If not, follow up with another question, okay? Thanks. So service arrangements and payments for the EFC SIL, that's basic brass code 188. The supplementals do not autofill. The unit type, the unit, and the rate fields are required. The amount payable cannot be more than the term in basic plus the MAPCY amount. Okay, and this is going to be based on that monthly amount for the EFC SIL kids. Errors and warnings associated to payments with the service 188 are identified on the child foster care report. If you have further questions on that, I'm hoping Melissa and Molly can answer those. All right, so that's that in a nutshell of the overview. Right now, we'll talk a little bit on SSIS and the placement piece and how that plays into the MAPCY. So the continuous placement starts when the agency has placement and care responsibility and the child is removed from the home. It might be based on a 72-hour hold, or the parents place the kiddo in the treatment prior to requesting services for a local agency and a voluntary placement agreement is signed. The continuous placement is going to be defined as the entire time that child lives away from their parents through any type of legal authority. And it's going to end when the kiddo is back with their parent, they have a new legal custodian, or an adoption is finalized, tribal customary adoption, or they reach the age of majority. All placements over 24 hours must be entered into SSIS. There's one exception for law enforcement or tribal social service places a child with the other parent. It's not a placement. You can load that as a location just so you can keep track of where your kiddos are. So when you're entering a child or youth into placement, there's three main things that you have to pay attention to as it relates to different federal and state fiscal rules. They require entering the entry date before the 60th date of placement. You want to make sure the provider selected in the BizOrg field must match the service vendor and the service arrangements and payments. And then also federal, state, and fiscal rules require entering the placement end date before the 60th date. Okay. Important to double check when you're doing your foster care, shelter care, residential treatments, group home. You want to make sure that you have the correct organization or vendor selected. Different folks have different licensings. So we want to make sure that you're picking the right thing when you're putting in that placement. If legal authority changes, you want to make sure you have that captured within the system. And then if a family's address changes. Because all these play into the SSIS tool. So here's just a screenshot of what it looks like. The MAPCY DOC assessments fall under a child's node, and it's captured in there. The whole history is contained, whether MAPCYs are approved, still sitting in draft status, whatnot. First tab you're going to see is the setup tab. This one's extremely important in the process because what it's doing, it's going to record important information that plays into the assessment. In addition to that, information is going to feed into service arrangements and payments. It should be completed from the top down, as different fields and selections are going to pop up and guide you to the next questions, and then based on previous selections. A couple different things to note. Age validation for setup. So for one that happens most often is for those youth. If you have a child, especially if they're going into permanency, you can complete the youth tool for any child who is 12 years, 9 months old. And most often I advise folks to do that so that, because within the youth tool, there's more descriptors, there's more points afforded for kids, and we can tend to get a higher level based on the scoring grids that are contained within that. So just note that you could get error messages if you try to go, if you try to do a child tool for a kid that's over 13 and a half years old, you're not gonna be able to do that. Pay attention to, for the purpose of assessment, 99% of the MAPCYs that come across are for foster care benefit level. That's determining the child's rate while they're in care. There's some confusion that comes into play if, let's say, a worker, an assessor picks the purpose of assessment as initial permanency benefit level as their, let's say they placed a child in a pre-adoptive or pre-kinship home. If they choose that initial permanency benefit level and that placement's happening after January 1st of 15, that's going to become the new foster care payment based on the effective date of that MAPCY. So just some folks will have foster care and then they put initial permanency for a couple months out as they're working towards the adoption and kinship process. Okay, within the setup tab, you want to make sure that the correct placement is selected if the child has been there before, which is kind of the example I gave a little bit ago between the placement at the Andersons, then the Bensons, and then back to the Andersons. Because you want to make sure that that's going to capture the right times that the kiddo was there. And that placement information is going to pull into both the rating report, the notice to the caregiver, and those service arrangements. This happens a lot. The ones I see come across my desk most often are for the extraordinary levels for our kids who are in corporate foster care. In the setup tab, those corporate foster homes do not autofill. I'm not sure why, but they don't. Since they don't have a caregiver, the responsible party is a text field. So what I ask folks to do is make sure that you put the name of the corporation, this should be entered, and not the name of the agency or the removal parent. And this is important because at the point you complete the MAPCY, you approve it, you do the MAPCY rating report in addition to the notice to the caregiver. You don't want the notice to go back to your agency, that makes sense. Nor do you want it to go to the removal parent because in that notification to the caregiver, it's saying what the daily rate is for taking care of this child in foster care. Don't really want to send that to the parents. So just pay attention to who you're filling in that setup tab. Like I stated before, the effective date, it's typically the beginning of the placement. And SSIS is going to set the effective date according to those emergency level D rules that I just talked about. Don't try and override them or you will cause a mess. That will take bunches of people to figure that out and clean that up. Then we have the document tab. This is the meat and bones of the assessment tool. This is where you capture the child's needs and the different levels of parenting that are happening within the home. Within each of the child needs and the parenting, there's a text box, and that's where folks would describe the high child needs that are occurring in the home, if it's a level D, or any type of parenting that is at the extensive or exceptional levels. Then we move on to the scoring tab, and this is going to provide a summary of each of the domains different calculations that happen, and I will tell you the scoring is crazy and it's totally embedded into the system and it's hard to explain. However, if you and or your assessors or approvers have questions about a particular MAPCY, if you're close to another level or whatnot, by all means give me a call and we can go through those together. And I can try and help explain it. But on the scoring tab, as you can see in this example, kiddo had a starting benefit level of J. There was no child care level increases. Standard benefit level was still a J. They had an extraordinary level increase of 3. So the standard plus extraordinary gives them an M. Current approved level is an M. And if you see to the right of your screen, the different statuses will populate. This example, both the MAPCY and the extraordinary level have been approved. What you might find is if you're having issues with someone saying, it's not feeding in, I can't pull it into the service arrangement, this, that, the other thing, double check that scoring tab and or the grid at the very top of the MAPCY stuff, and you will see if it's been approved or if it's still in draft status, pending agency approval, pending state approval. What I see most often with questions that arise with the extraordinary level, because I'm the reviewer at the state of those, most often the MAPCY has been approved, but the extraordinary level is still languishing in draft status or pending agency certification and hasn't been launched over to DHS yet. Okay, I realize I'm going through this really fast. I'm losing my breath because I talk too fast. So here we go, MAPCY property tabs. This is basically a screenshot, snapshot of what has happened, what's the history of this MAPCY, who completed it, who was the assessor, who was it changed by, who approved it, did it go over to the state, who approved it at the state. So just kind of a snapshot of what's gone on. And then there's the redaction tab. I can honestly say I have never used this, but this came into fruition 2-3 years ago at the point that the legislature passed different redaction standards and statute as it related to like the out-of-home placement plan and social medical histories. So at the point SSIS created those redaction fields for those instruments, they also added it for the MAPCY. And then the last tab within the tool in SSIS is the comments tab. This turns out to be a decent communication tool between assessors and approvers because you guys are in that tool. But at the point it comes over to the state for review and approval of an extraordinary level, it kind of falls off people's radar because you've completed your MAPCY piece. I'm doing mine on my end, so I send a message back. You don't get an alert or a reminder on that. So unless you go back into that MAPCY, you're not going to know that I left you a comment. So what I will do, especially if I set an extraordinary level back to clarification needed status, I will send an email to anybody whose name showed up on that property tab. So the creator, the assessor, and the approver will all get a note from me. So speaking about the extraordinary levels, they were designed to meet the needs of our highest needs kids in care in the areas of mental health, physical health, and developmental. And it's to help support those caregivers who are providing really high levels of supervision and keeping those kids placed in the community, okay? And we can add anywhere from 0 to 5 levels onto the kid's standard MAPCY benefit level to help support that placement and or that permanency. 2 different exemptions of the kiddos who cannot get it are any of our parenting youth. So let's say we have a 16-year-old minor mom who is parenting her child in care, but that child's not under the custody and control of the agency. They cannot get an extraordinary level increase, nor can any of the youth in the EFC SIL. So the eligibility for an extraordinary level, we're going to have 3 entry tests. So if you have a MAPCY that scores a 62 or greater, that meets the first entry test. Next, it's going to go look at the highest needs in domain D. So if you have a level D in any of those 3, mental health, physical, or developmental, that'll pass the test. Or if you have a C in both the C in both mental health and developmental, that'll pass the entry test. And then it looks at domain C to see if there's any high level of supervision. And so if you have any parenting of extensive or exceptional, that'll pass the test as well. Okay, so all 3 of those things are hit. Then SSIS is going to guide the assessor through what we call the certifying tests. And then that's just a process of multiple questions that are being asked and answered. So what happens then when the extraordinary level is completed, the assessor is going to send the MAPCY for agency approval. So the approver is either going to approve the MAPCY or reset it to draft. Next, then, for the extraordinary level, the assessor needs to send for agency certification. So it's a two-step process. You have to get the MAPCY approved and you have to get the extraordinary level certified. So with the extraordinary level, the approver is going to send it for state approval. They're going to reset it to draft, or they can deny agency certification. Once they send it for state approval, you have to make sure that the MAPCY's been approved or it won't launch over. And once the extraordinary level request is sent for state approval, it's going to fall off that approval log. In the meantime, while the state is reviewing the extraordinary levels, you can make payments off the MAPCY. I tell folks not to do it right away because I tend to get, unless I'm on vacation, I tend to get the MAPCYs approved within a couple days of submission. What tab would have been missed if the MAPCY is not pulling in the caregiver's name? That would have been in the setup tab, where you probably picked either the wrong business org or the wrong placement. So my screen's so small. So Jean, if you can't find that, email me afterwards and I can take a look at that particular MAPCY, okay? If you can't figure that one out. But it should have been in the setup tab. So you need to ensure that the extraordinary levels has a final status and it's not left in draft status. This is a question that the help desk gets a lot. When folks are saying it's not feeding into the service arrangement, it's state hasn't approved, it's been sitting there for 2 weeks, which is alarming to me. So when I go in to your side of the system, most often I find that it's not in final status. So final statuses of an extraordinary level is not eligible. So that could be the assessor shut it down because the child doesn't live with the caregiver currently, or the assessor cannot say that this kiddo was not placed with this particular provider, he or she would not be in a more restrictive setting. So the assessor can shut that down, not eligible. The approver can deny agency certification, that shuts it down. Or you guys sent it over to DHS for review and approval, and then you decided to withdraw it. Said, no, not this time. Or I approve it, or I deny it. So, because if it's in draft status or pending state approval, pending agency certification, it means it's not completed yet. And what happens once it comes over to my side of the world? I will either approve it, I will either deny it, or I can request clarification. When I do clarification needed, it's because different items were not properly described within the MAPCY or the extraordinary level. Once I set it for clarification as needed, the agency has 30 days to reply to that, whether it's completing a revised MAPCY or doing extra work on the extraordinary level. If the clarification is not sent, the request will auto-deny after that 30th day. What I will do, and I've been doing since Northstar launched, is a week before it's set to auto-deny, I will send an email to everybody who was in that properties tab and say, hey, remember I sent you this 23 days ago, saying this is what needs to be done for the extraordinary level. It's set to auto-deny next week. Please do the work. I may hear back from you, I may not. So at the date it does auto-deny, I will send you another email saying, hey, I came into this, it auto-denied, I'm required to send a notice. Please let me know what you intend to do. I'll give you another week to get that done, but if it's not completed, I have to send that notice out to the family. There's an extraordinary levels log that's built into SSIS. That's a better way to help you track since they do fall off the approval log. All right, scoring and benefits. Okay, as everybody knows at this point, there's no magic formula that determines a child's MAPCY level because the scoring is done automatically by SSIS. And when the MAPCY came into fruition, it was so that we could provide a consistent scoring process across the state because the difficulty of care assessment was very arbitrary. We couldn't really gauge and make it consistent across the state. So points to benefit level, SSIS is going to add up all the domains except for childcare, including any special points to get the total MAPCY. Then those points are going to be translated into a starting benefit level, which can be anywhere from a B to an L. Once it does that, then it's going to add any child care increase. And those come in as a level of 0 through 4, and that'll make up the standard benefit level. And then the extraordinary levels are then added to the standard benefit. And once approved, it's going to determine the standard plus extraordinary currently approved level. And that can increase a child or youth's benefit level up to a Q. And then that final benefit level is what determines the monthly payment. And that's what's going to feed into the service arrangements. Payment is based solely on the MAPCY, which is the supplemental plus the basic. SSIS is not going to allow an assessor or an approver to override the benefit level. However, there is special cost code 96, which can allow you to pay above and beyond the MAPCY level. Not many agencies are doing that because those funds are spent entirely by the county, and those are not subject to fiscal reimbursement through the Northstar reconciliation process. So this is just a screenshot of the different benefit levels that we have for this fiscal year. Basic rate went up to $689 for those kiddos under 6, all the way up to $964 for our older youth. And then now each level of the MAPCY is worth $109 for a child's benefit level per month. This is up from $100 when Northstar first launched in 2015. So they're going up slowly but surely. I'm hoping to support our kids better as they're in care. So for service arrangements and payments, I'm just going to touch on this lightly because Molly and Melissa are going to touch on it a little bit more. Just make sure there's 5 key fields for foster care service arrangements and payments. I want to double check your service start date, your service end date, who the client is. It has happened. We've picked wrong ones. Service vendor and which service you're looking at. So here's just a screenshot of the different fields within the service arrangements and payments screen that you want to pay attention to. A valid placement is required for your service arrangements, and the service vendor must match the placement provider on the placement grid. An approved MAPCY, like I stated earlier, is required to pay that supplemental per diem. It's not required if the placement is less than 30 days. If you don't complete the MAPCY, it will default to the level B for those that are past the 30th day of the continuous. Service vendor must match the provider selected on the MAPCY assessment. If no MAPCY exists or the MAPCY is not approved, payments are based on the emergency rate for foster care, that emergency level D. So if there's no approved MAPCY, it's going to go to basic or level D. If waiting on an extraordinary level from the state, the agency approved MAPCY level will default. When do you need a new MAPCY? A new MAPCY must be completed when a child in foster care has a change of placement, because it's important because each MAPCY is unique to a particular child in a particular placement with a particular provider. As we all know, kids' needs change, and the parenting for kids changes as well. And what you need to make sure is that you end that current service arrangement when the placement ends and create a new one for the new foster home once the MAPCY assessment is approved. All right, we're in the home stretch. So other things to note, reassessments. These are all in statute. They must be completed within 30 days of the following events. For a child in foster care, if they have a change of placement location. So they leave the Andersons, they go to the Bensons. Kind of a slam dunk. I would consider that an initial assessment for the new placement because they're with a new family who's parenting them. For a child in foster care, 6 months since the initial assessment and annually thereafter. So the example I gave earlier, child was placed January 1st. That next MAPCY assessment is going to be due 6 months after that, which is going to be July 1st. And then 12 months after that, which will be July 1st of 2021, okay? For a child in foster care, at the request of the financially or legally responsible agency, meaning you can do a MAPCY when you choose to do one, okay? Most often it's because things have changed in the home that's going to raise a child's benefit level, not necessarily take away. At the request of the commissioner, most often when we see this, it's because a child is launching into a Northstar permanency, and their eligibility worker in doing the eligibility determination can see that, oh, this kid's just turning 13. I bet he could get more points if we use the youth tool. So they might reach out to you and say, hey, I think it might be a good idea if you do this. That's an example of that. And also at the request of the caregiver. Since these are in statute, you can refer to them if you have chronic requesters for reassessments because it needs to be in writing. And if it's been less than 6 months, written documentation needs to be provided that there has been some type of a significant change. And most often those are letters or diagnostic assessments, things like that from other working professionals. MAPCY reassessment dates are the initial MAPCY is based on the placement date. The next MAPCY is calculated based on the effective date of the previous MAPCY. So let's say in the example I gave you with January 1st, let's say that MAPCY went lower than that emergency level D and the effective date of the MAPCY was changed over to January 15th. The next MAPCY is going to be due 6 months out. So that would bring you to July 15th. But there's new programming, not new at this point. A couple years ago, we did change the programming so that would better align with fiscal and policy that we're going to bump it to the first of the month after that would due. So this kit in this example, the January 15th would then be due, you would think, July 15th. SSIS is going to guide the user to bump it out to August 1st for when that next MAPCY is going to be due. Therefore, the recommended effective date is the first of the month for any MAPCYs completed after the initial assessment. Makes it easier for our fiscal folks when they're making payments, they're not splitting payments, all that kind of stuff. It's easier, I think, for what I've heard from folks in the field, it's easier to remember when you need to get out and do your MAPCYs for your kids in care. But no, it's just a warning that SSIS is going to give folks saying, hey, are you sure you want it to be August 17th for this effective date? The worker can still choose that because sometimes we still realize that things happen mid-month. Child started in child care or another kid got placed in the home. Different things like that happen mid-month. So you can still pick the exact date that you choose. There is a general report in SSIS which can help you track when assessments and reassessments are due. And that falls under placement and then assessments due, MAPCY or DOC. These are some frequently asked questions that both myself and the help desk have gotten. Different things. Can a MAPCY be unapproved? Nope. Nope. Once a MAPCY is approved, we would recommend that a revised MAPCY might be the best way to fix that issue. Kathy, yes, a question just came across. Can the caregiver request a new MAPCY every 6 months? Yeah, they can. It needs to be in writing. This is for foster care. Needs to be in writing from the effective date of that last MAPCY that they had completed. But yeah, they can certainly ask. Terry, if you do an initial permanency benefit MAPCY and the placement disrupts and the child gets moved to a non-permanency home and a new MAPCY needs to be done. Is that a question? What you would do, I'm not sure what your question is, Terry, but what you would do is if placement disrupts and the child gets moved to a new foster home, you would need to do a new MAPCY for that particular placement. Oh, sorry. Oh, goodness. I can't get to the question. Eric or Heidi, can you grab Bonita's question?
I'm not seeing Bonita Parker's question in the answered, so I'm not seeing it in the Q&A. So Bonita, can you re-ask your question in the Q&A?
Yeah, I'm not seeing it either.
And then Terry has a follow-up question to her question above. She says, sorry, or I'm sorry. This person says, sorry, does the MAPCY then go back to a foster care benefit 1?
Yes, yes, it would. The initial permanency benefit level, the reason why that was brought up or was created for the setup tab was most often to capture those kids who are transitioning from a legacy foster care placement into a Northstar permanency, because the legacy kids stay on the DOC until they go into a Northstar, whether it's moves to a Northstar foster care setting or a Northstar permanency option. So the initial permanency benefit MAPCY really means nothing to our kids who are already in Northstar foster care. I'm not sure if that makes sense or not. Like I said, you can choose that as you're working towards permanency. However, it's still going to pay the foster care rate based off of that.
And then Bonita asks, so would you use the SPCC 10 when the MAPCY is approved within those first 30 days and the MAPCY is a lower rate?
That's special cost code. Yeah, I don't know all these fiscal terms. And the MAPCY is
I
approved
believe that
within
is a
those.
special cost code acronym.
Molly or Melissa, can you chime in on that, do the payment piece?
This is Molly. We can, yeah, I think we cover that in our presentation.
Great.
Otherwise,
Oh.
Bonnie, I can connect with you after the presentation also.
Okay. All right, so another one, can I delete a MAPCY? If the MAPCY is still in draft status, yes, it can be deleted. As general practice, we don't support deleting approved MAPCYs, and we will not for sure if a payment has been made off of the approved MAPCY. It is possible for the help desk to set it back to draft so that any errors can be corrected. That's most often what we see happening, okay? And sometimes those are the things which I spoke of earlier in this presentation, was that get a hold of me so we can problem solve before we go through the mentors, through the help desk to get it set back to draft. Another question just came. If a kiddo is placed and runs away, so location is entered during the kiddo's absence and then returns, is back at the previous MAPCY, will a new MAPCY need to be entered if the placement provider remains the same? Yes and no. You wouldn't necessarily need a new MAPCY, but what can come into play is when kids run, there's different indicators within domain A that helps capture a family taking the child back into their care. So it could possibly potentially raise the child's benefit level if you did one. Otherwise, we kind of consider that a temporary absence and it wasn't a placement. So no, you would not need a new MAPCY, but you might choose to do one. Do I need a MAPCY if the child is there less than 30 days? Nope. If it's within the first 30 days of the continuous placement, the child will receive that emergency level D. If it's past them, the system is going to default to the level B without an approved MAPCY. So you don't have to, but just know that that provider is going to get a B to support that. Uh-oh. Oops, there we go. I lost my ability to scroll. So two different functionalities within the MAPCY. One, you can create a revised MAPCY. The other one is going to be copy. So we'll go through the revised first. This is going to keep the same information, yet it's going to allow an assessor to change any needs or indicators. Okay, so it's useful when you accidentally select the wrong placement. You can do a revised MAPCY to fix that. When there's an appeal, this is when we see it most often used. Useful with SSIS template changes, which we have not had in several years. Or when you just kind of realize, whoops, this didn't work out, something went funky, something went haywire, different effective dates, things like that. Please note with the revised MAPCY, it's going to keep the same effective date and you cannot change it, okay? Different fiscal impacts, you're going to complete a revised MAPCY if you don't want to change the effective date. If the MAPCY level increases on this revised, you need to create a new service arrangement for any service dates not already paid. A new service arrangement and payments must be made for MAPCY adjustments, special cost code 19. If the MAPCY level decreases, you need a new service arrangement, must be created for any service dates not already paid, and any payments made to the provider will need to be split in order to claim Northstar. That is a Molly and Melissa follow-up question if you have anything on that. And then if the MAPCY level remains the same, no changes are needed for that service arrangement. The other functionality for copy MAPCY, it keeps the same information, just like the revised one did. However, you have to change a different effective date, okay? Most often, this is used when you're completing a reassessment, when a child changes placements, and that's when you're gonna have to pay attention within the setup tab that you're picking the correct placement. And then also, again, when SSIS templates change. Fiscal impacts of the copy, if the level increases, the same thing that you did if you did a revised one. If it decreases, same thing as far as new service arrangements and service dates, new effective dates. If the MAPCY level remains the same, but the effective date is not the first of a month, when you're doing the copy, a new service arrangement must be created for any service dates not already paid. or any payments made where the service dates include the new effective date need to be split in order to claim Northstar. Post-permanency reassessments, I included these slides on this presentation just because there are questions that come up. However, I've been invited back for the September coffee talk to go into more depth on the post-permanency reassessments. And then I also want to throw out to any of you who are on the line today that I can always do full MAPCY and or post-permanency reassessment training for your agency. So just reach out to me and we can get that scheduled. In a nutshell, the post-permanency reassessments must be 6 months since the last assessment was completed. It does not have to be 6 months after finalization. The process is laid out in these next few slides about what happens. Basically, your agency, the financially responsible agency, will go back out, do the reassessment. If it's the same or lower, it just kind of shuts down. If it goes higher than what the child's getting in permanency, comes back over to DHS, we will create an amendment to the benefit agreement, and we will send that out to the family for signature, and that will increase the child's rate, okay? Elizabeth has a question on the 6-month reassessment. 2 kids in placement. Due to the date of placement, initial MAPCY and level, child 1 was assessed at a higher than D, so initial MAPCY reverts back to day 1. The next MAPCY is due July 1st. Child 2 was assessed lower than D, so initial MAPCY level began on day 31, and the next MAPCY for child 2 was due August 1st. They are siblings residing in the same foster home. Can the reassessment dates be synced up for purposes of their next assessment due at the same time? Yes, what I would recommend doing, Elizabeth, you don't want that one that was due for July 1st to be late. So I would go in and do the second child and have that effective date be July 1st, and then go on from there. And there's a post-permanency reassessment log that shows up on your side of SSIS as it does ours. So once our worker puts the child on the log, it'll populate there. Like I said, we'll go into more depth of this next month at the coffee talk. But if you have questions in between now and then, by all means, reach out to me and we can go over that. Many questions come in regarding the child care domain, domain H. And this child care is needed for when a caregiver works outside the home or is enrolled in a training or vocational educational program. It's based on the average of child care needed throughout the calendar year, okay? We've had a lot of questions coming in now, especially due to COVID, because everybody's home with their kids all the time now, it seems. But unless they have somebody coming into the home because they are working, the parents are working, childcare does not count for that if they are not. So you just have somebody just in the home, everybody's home, but it's not based on work, just to help keep an eye on the kids. That's not childcare. That would be captured in domain B. We can talk about that if folks have questions later. As you can see, it cuts down from the time, you know, the higher levels are for those kids 0 through 6 years old, and they basically get cut in half at the point the child turns 7 and goes away completely at the point the child turns 13. Here's a slide on foster care and waivered services. If you have to determine the RMS rates, there's an SSIS update way back, number 429, that talks about joint policy and SSIS fiscal article on how service arrangements and payments for those waivered kids and how that interacts with Northstar. There's a MAPCY search function within the system that can help you align when your MAPCYs are due. You can sort by provider, you can sort by due date, you can sort by kid's name, different things like that. This one was developed more from a fiscal standpoint, but there are some policy pieces that play into that too, as far as how it can help workers navigate through that. And search for service dates on service arrangements or payments if they overlap effective dates and whatnot. And then that is it. So like I said, take this slide with you, hold it close, call me or email me with any questions that you have. Benita has a question on the education piece. One of our workers was wondering about educating the child at home due to COVID. Are any of the questions on the MAPCY directed at educating at home? Yes, Benita, it's going to be in domain G. And depending on if you're using the child tool or the youth tool, I believe it's indicator 10 for child and indicator 12 for the youth. What I've seen folks needing to do as well is take another look at domain C for supervision because the supervision levels have increased, even if the child's needs haven't. So it kind of plays a mix. I have to say that domain G, just by selecting that in-home educating piece, most likely will not create an increase to the benefit level. But try it and see if it works. And if it's in draft status or you can't get the kid up to where you think it's kind of feeling, by all means, give me a call and we can go through that. Okay. Cheryl has a question. We have a few dual license programs that need to include their foster care children in the daycare numbers. In this case, we reflect those hours and that the children are present during daycare hours in the MAPCY. As having children there does affect the number of daycare children they can accept. Is this the best practice? Well, you can't, with the dual license, not that I agree with this, but with the dually licensed homes, you cannot count the foster kid as being in daycare. It's a parental thing. So the way the tool is structured is that the family, this is what I don't agree with, would have to send the kid down the street to another provider in order to get the child care credit. Because it's a 4E rule that came in, that's been in effect that since Northstar came. It confused me at the point when I first started with this because that didn't make sense to me, but it's laid out clearly in the 4E language, and Cheryl, I can send that to you. It was a thing that came out of Deb Besky-Brown's area when she was foster care specialist, so I will look for that. Janice, let me try and get to your question. I was taking notes when you answered Myra's question about kiddos running and then returning. You do not need to do a new MAPCY, as long as it was just a location in between. What you might want to do is do another MAPCY, because in domain A, you can give that family, quote, credit for bringing that child back into their care. Could raise the benefit level up or not. Okay, Pam. Yep, I'll get that to Heidi or Eric and they can send that out. Any other questions for me before we launch into Melissa and Molly? All right, Heidi and Eric, I'm just going to be a participant now.
Thank you so much, Jody. You're a wealth of information. And I'm sure our county partners are anxious to pick your brain more after the presentation here.
I'll be here. Thanks.
As you indicated, well, first of all, I want to thank you for being here today. And we're going to turn it over now to Melissa Meger and Molly Koehler, who will be presenting some of the fiscal aspects of the MAPCY. So please continue to use the Q&A feature down in your Zoom menu bar to ask those questions. Thank you. Take it away, Molly.
Hi, this is Molly Koehler, and I am part of the SSIS Business Operations area at DHS. And I will send it over to Melissa to introduce herself as well.
Hello, I'm Melissa. I'm the fiscal subject matter expert in SSIS Business Operations. We're going to just go over some fiscal pieces on reviewing with MAPCY. So if you could just give me a quick second. I need to stop that. Can you all see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Again, I wanted to thank Jody again for all of her expertise. She's fantastic. So thank you, Jody. The fiscal world and with MAPCYs are very important functions within SSIS. So we wanted to share some of the components that really create the fiscal flows and how they processes go more smoothly on the fiscal side of things. So with that being said, I'm just going to show you some of the service arrangements, and Jody's kind of touched base on a lot of the information that we would go through normally in our fiscal pieces. So we're actually going to go over this fairly quickly, which is a good thing for you guys, I'm sure, because some of you really probably don't care too much about it, but we're still going to go over it anyway. I wanted to say that slide 38, like Jody had mentioned, the most important slide at this, our slide is slide 38. That is the most important thing for workers to remember, and so we'll cover that in a little bit. Today our agenda is sorry, this is different than I'm used to. There we go. So our agenda, we're just going to briefly go over the service arrangements that Jody really touched base on already. Then we're going to discuss the vouchers and then the payments, the EFC Sales Payments examples. Molly is then going to go over the proofing messages and the warning messages with regards to the child foster care report. And then we're also going to touch base on just some miscellaneous things and frequently asked questions at the help desk. Just a second, I'm on a dual or a one screen today, so I'm kind of struggling getting my boundaries here. All right, so you've seen this picture before, but this is the screenshot that the service arrangement essentially needs, and all of those check boxes, those have to be filled out with the service dates, the client dates, the service vendors, and then the programs and services. Those are a mandatory thing on the service arrangement, which essentially will create vouchers and payments to go forward. The valid placement is required. Some of the MAPCYs that we do see, especially coming into the help desk, are the incorrect placements that are on the MAPCYs. So we really want you to pay attention to those when you're getting those errors in the payments. And then also, like Jody had mentioned, the approved MAPCY is required to pay that supplemental per diem. So obviously it's not required within the first 30 days, but it's definitely important to get those done within that 30 days. And then if no MAPCY exists or the MAPCY is not approved, the payments are based off of those emergency rates. So getting those approved is good to see. And we do see quite a few errors with that as well. So it's good to have those done before the payments are made. So like I said, the service arrangements that are entered actually generate a voucher, which then goes to your foster care parents to review and then ask for payment. Vouchers are created off of those service arrangements, so making sure that those service arrangements are intact coming from those MAPCYs is good. And then most agencies do require those vouchers to be signed. So just making sure that you're following your practices and procedures that are best fitting for your agency and understanding those. And then, like I said, Jody touched base on a lot of the fiscal components within her presentation, so we're not going to go over a lot of this, but I just wanted to note the more important examples of the service arrangements and the payments and how they're made off of those basic rates. So the MAPCY is completed within the first 30 days, and the amount is lower than the level D. And again, don't try and override that. SSIS makes those updates on their own. If the MAPCY is completed within the first 30 days and the amount is lower than level D, the lower rate will become effective and the date of the approval. So again, don't try and override those. Like Jody said, if you try and override those, there could be a lot of fiscal components. Plus, then again, we'll have to do many data fixes that we try to prevent. If the MAPCY is completed after the 30 days of the initial placement and the MAPCY is lower than a level D, the lower amount will be paid effective the 31st date of the placement. The basic rate provides for the child's food, clothing, shelter, school supplies, personal incidentals, and daily supervision, and that includes typical travel to the child's home and school, and that amount is set by the child's age and increases as the child gets older. This next slide shows the basic per diem rates, which changes annually. These rates on the screen were effective July 1st, 2020, and they go through June 30th of next year. Those rates change with the state's fiscal year and are calculated by our FOD staff. This payment is this is actually an example of a child foster care payment with brass code 181 in a placement episode from July 1st going forward. As you can see, this client has a level G for a supplemental. He has a basic rate of the 22.65, which is what you saw on the last screen. The supplemental per diem rate is that $17.92 for a total of $40.57. And then I also included the link to the bulletin, which has all of the rates associated with this year's fiscal year.
Hey, Molly.
This is Melissa. What's up, Eric?
There's a question from Pam Nelson. When would a county use the alternate rate?
I can take that one. I can take that one, Melissa.
Okay, go ahead.
The county does not use the alternate rate. That comes into play when we have any kids under the age of 6 who are going into permanency. So if they're going to go through an adoption or a TPLPC and they're under the age of 6, the alternate rate comes into play, because with Northstar, any kid under the age of 6, the foster care benefit level gets cut in half, which we call the preschool/alternate rate.
Thanks, Jody. I can't see the questions, so I'm not able to see any of that, so thank you. And then here are the supplemental rates for, again, this fiscal year's 2021. The MAPCY sets those supplemental payments amount by the measuring the extra needs of the care. And then each child is then assessed, like Jody had mentioned in her presentation. So again, we've included the link for the Northstar rates that FOD includes at the end of our presentation in the resource section, as well as in the last slide. And then there are such things as a MAPCY adjustment. The MAPCY adjustment payment is used when a payment has already been made. Typically this is for that first 30 days or if there is a reassessment done. If it's paid at the base level or a supplemental level, and then all of a sudden now it changes to a new level, that's when you would use a special cost code 19 on the payment. In this case, we made a payment for the base level, but then we changed our MAPCY level from a level D to a level G. So when making the payment, when you enter the special cost code 19 into the payment, SSIS will automatically adjust the payment level difference. And again, Jody had mentioned this earlier about how we should have that MAPCY level as the effective date being the first of the month. When that does happen, it makes things on the accounting end much more easier for us. Sometimes there can be differences as far as the service arrangements, or there's just some different wonky errors that do occur. So we suggest as much as possible to make those renewals as of the first of the month, because then we see less problems on the fiscal side. Now we're going to talk briefly about the EFC Sales Payments. Jody again touched base on some of this, but we'll just go over it again and maybe you'll catch something that we have that she didn't have. So again, she said that EFC Sales are the owners of the MAPCYs. They receive the same benefits as if they were in foster care, and then some funds are paid directly to the vendors, such as landowners or landlords or a school of some sort. And then some funds may be paid directly to the youth as well. Service arrangements and payments are used with Service 188, which is Supervised Independent Living. The MAPCY levels do not autofill like we talked about earlier, and I'm actually going to give you some examples on why that doesn't autofill in just a bit. This is an approved MAPCY for an EFC skill. This kid was approved March 6th of 2020 with an approved level at level E. And then this is the example of what's on the Northstar Care basic rate table. So at this point, the monthly basic rate is $964 a month, with the supplemental being at $327. So on the payment, it would pull over as, well, a accounting worker would actually do all of this manually because, again, like we said, the MAPCY level doesn't pull in on situations like this. So the basic level here would be that $964 with the supplemental MAPCY rate of E. So it's a grand total of $1,291. And that can be split up in many different ways. It just depends on what you're paying for the month and how you're paying it. So why doesn't the MAPCY auto calculate? Wendy had asked this question earlier, so I wanted to go over some of the reasons on why that doesn't calculate. Sometimes the fiscal worker is paying rent, an apartment for the first and last month's rent, the damage deposit, utilities, some educational expenses, or some sort of monthly stipend. They don't auto calculate because each EFC's kids has that different rate, and your rent could be a different amount than what's applied, or your damage deposit could be differently. That's why there's so many different ways to pay these things, which is why it's just easier not to have those auto calculated. Some payments, if you have some sort of an overpayment or some additional maintenance expenses, do require a special cost code. There's several different cost codes in regards to EFC Sales kids. The 16 would be that additional maintenance expense. The number 17 could be the damage deposit or the rent that we talked about. And then special cost code 98 is the non-maintenance expenses.
Hey, Melissa.
Yep.
There's a question from Christina. If an agency is running into issues using special cost code 19, would it be best to email the help desk or Melissa and Molly?
So we would prefer that you go through the help desk. You can absolutely CC on that too. Actually, Molly is going to go through some of those reasonings too on why that happens in just a little bit. So maybe you'll come up with a reason on how to fix that too. But yeah, if you can absolutely just CC on us with the help desk, we'll answer it both ways. Next, Molly is going to go through some of the proofing messages and the warnings that we see on the Child Foster Care Report. Molly, let me know when you want me to change screens.
Okay, thanks, Melissa. And you can go ahead and switch. So there are two categories on the Child Foster Care Report that include the MAPCY edits and warnings, and they include their own proofing messages. We're just going to cover the most common issues that we see that come through the help desk. And at the end of the presentation, there is also a link to our MAPCY tips sheet that we had created in collaboration with Jody. And this document goes over all the proofing messages associated with the proofing categories. So we can switch to the next. Oh, we're on the next slide. Okay, never mind.
Sorry,
So the first the first proofing message here is a MAPCY assessment was due on 8/1/2018. The supplemental per diem portion of the payment is not reimbursable. So the solution to fix this is verify that the MAPCY or the DOC assessment has been completed and approved. Once the MAPCY is approved, and if it's paying at a higher level, depending on the effective date of the supplemental payments, this will be eligible and included in the Northstar Fiscal Reconciliation and will be picked up on your next child foster care report. We can go on to the next slide. So proofing message 1261, the MAPCY assessment was due more than 3 months ago. The supplemental per diem is not reimbursable when the MAPCY assessment is more than 3 months overdue. This is telling us that the MAPCY is overdue, and fiscal staff will need to contact the worker in this instance and let the worker know that a MAPCY needs to be completed. The supplemental per diem will not be reimbursable when the MAPCY assessment is more than 3 months overdue. And next slide, please. Proofing message 1262 is verify the MAPCY assessment. Oh, sorry. The MAPCY level paid D is higher than the eligible MAPCY level basic for the service dates. So for a solution for this is you'll want to split the payment and use special cost code 96 for the portion that was overpaid, but also verify to make sure that the MAPCY has been approved first, because that may be what's causing the error as well. But if it does turn out that the MAPCY was approved at the basic level, then you'll want to split the payment and separate those payments out using the special cost code. Okay, the next slide, please. Proofing message 1263. The MAPCY level paid basic is less than the MAPCY level E. So in this instance, you paid lower than what the MAPCY was approved for. So here you'll need to split the payment out using the special cost code 19. There isn't a way to make a service arrangement match at this point, due to the fact that the MAPCY was effective earlier than the end date on the original service arrangement and payment. So on this one, you will also need to make sure that you do pay the provider for that higher rate as well. Okay, on to the next slide. An agency-approved MAPCY exists with an effective date 1/19/2019. The service end date 1/31/2019 must be before 1/19/2019. So the service dates of the payment must be between the MAPCY effective date and then the next MAPCY effective date. For this example, you'll need to split the payment based on the effective date of the later MAPCY assessment. This is an example where the worker did not use the first of the month as the effective date, and this will require several steps to fix the error. And if you ever run into this proofing message and need assistance, just go ahead and send a ticket into the help desk and we can help walk you through that. Okay, and then the next slide. So this is a payment warning stating a MAPCY does not exist for the placement, service dates, and service vendor. So in this instance, it could be that the MAPCY has not been approved yet. It could be that the wrong placement episode has been chosen. So you'll just want to go back and verify that there is a MAPCY in there and all the correct data for this particular placement episode is within that MAPCY. Okay, next slide. The next warning is no matching service arrangement to adjust. For this one, you won't need a service arrangement for the special cost code 19. You'll make that adjustment directly from the original payment that was made. And I don't think we have an example of that, but I can definitely send that out with the other information that Heide is going to send out if anybody has further questions on that one. And I think that covers all the warnings.
Actually, Molly, going back to that last slide, we'll go over that MAPCY tip sheet, but the MAPCY tip sheet is a step-by-step process on how to fix a lot of those errors. And we didn't cover the majority of that stuff here, just very brief overview or high-level overview. So I'll send out that link, or if you haven't already received it, but it was also in the SSIS update last week. And that will give you step-by-step processes on how to fix all of these proofing messages, which I would absolutely use and try and figure that out prior to contacting the SSIS help desk, because sometimes it'll be an easy fix. So just a note. Thanks, Molly. Next, we're going to go over some of the MAPCY miscellaneous and frequently asked questions. Again, Jody did go through some of these, but I'm just going to make some notes on the fiscal pieces of things. One of our biggest questions that we receive is, can an agency make a payment for a lesser daily amount than the approved MAPCY? Jody did speak about the special cost code number 10. That is a possibility, and it is absolutely done. You would just pay it differently using that special cost code. So for this example, the per diem rate was $40.57. However, the negotiated rate was the $40 a day. So they would just do that special cost code 10 to make those arrangements. Same with the higher amounts, except we would use additional foster care, which is the special cost code 96. So in this example, the per diem rate was $40.57, and the negotiated rate was $50 a day. However, so we're making that second payment for the $9.43 a day using that special cost code 96, which is not reimbursable, so it will not show up on the child foster care report. Some other questions that we receive, more just like a warning, like this in this example, the MAPCY sent for approval option is not available. There's two solutions. Either the agency cannot send the MAPCY because there isn't a caregiver listed on the setup screen, which does happen often. So definitely check the caregiver in the placement tab. And then also it's very possible that the worker doesn't have the functions and the roles set up in admin correctly. If you have any questions about how to do that, definitely reach out to the help desk and we can get you those instructions. And then Jody went over this slide already too, but I do want to mention the middle one where it says, can you just delete a MAPCY? It is possible to reset the MAPCY back to draft. However, when those MAPCYs are associated to payments, that is where we would need to say no, that we cannot do that. If there's any MAPCYs that are associated with payments, just do a revision and then use a new MAPCY. Unfortunately, we cannot do data fixes on MAPCYs that have payments associated with them. So that's definitely one thing to check prior to either contacting Jody or the help desk, just to give you a better idea of what you need to do going forward. And then again, Jody went through the copies and the revisions on these, so I'm really not going to go over this too quickly, but I do want to mention that these are there for you to use, especially when there's fiscal problems happening. If there's anything like I just mentioned with the ability to maybe do a data fix, definitely check into these ideas first before we go forward, because we do look at the possibilities of doing these revisions and the copies first prior to doing any type of data fixes. And then this is the revision, the screen about keeping the same effective date. and then the fiscal impacts. And then this is the slide that I wanted to talk to you, that I wanted you guys to take away with mostly, which is slide 38. In the fiscal world, we don't know a whole lot of things that go on in the workers and the different types of changes that are done in SSIS when it comes to changing anything in client data. So making sure that you are communicating what changes are happening with your fiscal workers is really important, and it really does help in the long run as far as the fiscal flows. So even just sending an email, if affecting data on one of the messages, or it's in the middle of the month and there's going to be some updates to those levels, it's just important, and it kind of gives them a better clue on what to expect going forward. So just keeping those open lines of communication is really important for the smoother flow of the fiscal processes. This is the resource sheet that I had mentioned earlier, the link to that MAPCY tip sheet, which shows step-by-step processes of the warnings and edits that are with the child foster care report and the payments. So look at those briefly if you have any problems with any of those before contacting the SSIS help desk, and that might relieve some of the questions that you may have. And then, is there any questions? All right, Eric.
All right. I always like to give it a couple seconds to see if any questions trickle in.
Yep.
I did put a link to the latest SSIS update in the chat, and that contains that MAPCY tip sheet that Melissa was referring to. So if you want to click and save that link and review the tip sheet later. I do see a question came in from Cassandra Olson. We had a worker enter an incorrect MAPCY start date, and we're told by the help desk that it could not be deleted. What I am hearing today is that it could be.
Cassandra, if there is a payment associated with the MAPCY that is incorrect, it cannot be deleted. If there is not a payment associated with that MAPCY, what we can do is set it back to draft. And then you would have the ability to either delete or change whatever needs to occur. And we can look into that, Cassandra, if you want to send that to Jody, and I and Molly probably could take a look at it. There's several different steps that we have to look at in order to accomplish that.
This is Molly, and it may be another instance where you can just copy the MAPCY and then you're able to change that effective date without having to worry about a data fix or deleting or any of that information.
And then I kind of want to just revisit the question related to who do we send questions to about the MAPCY. It's always a good practice to send it through the help desk, even though it will be fielded by Molly and Melissa, who are our fiscal subject matter experts. It's a better way to track these questions so that we can see what the trends are in terms of, what people are confused about by topic area, including that MAPCY. So send your questions through the help desk and they'll be routed to, if it's fiscally related, it'll be routed to Molly and Melissa. If it's worker side related, it will probably be routed to business, which would be Jody.
I have to say, whenever anybody says my name on the scroll where it's typing what the text is, I keep coming up as God. I'm like, wow, I've got power today. Woo!
You're going to be leaving this meeting with delusions of grandeur.
I think so. That's
imagine.
funny.
Okay, it doesn't look like any other Q&A is coming through. Melissa, if you wouldn't mind leaving that slide up so people can get your information. Again, I want to encourage you to email the help desk first before you email Melissa and Molly. But if you have specific technical support requests related to the MAPCY, please feel free to reach out to our fiscal SMEs. And on that note, I'd like to take a 5-minute break. We've been at this for over an hour now, and I really appreciate your patience. And when we come back, we will cover the remainder of the presentation today, which will be the SSIS statewide release for version 20.3, which will be launched next Wednesday. So please join us back here at 10:35. Thanks. All right, welcome back, everybody. We're going to get started with information that is related to the SSIS version 20.3 statewide release, as I had indicated prior to going on break, that will be launched statewide next Wednesday. The information that I'll be covering today will predominantly be regarding what's new in SSIS. There are always, bug fixes and triage that happens throughout each statewide release. And I will be sending out this presentation in the next SSIS update with that bug defect and triage information that has occurred for SSIS 20.3. I know that Heidi sent out this presentation prior to us meeting today. And again, that bug defect and triage information is listed at the end of this presentation. But like I said, right now I'm just going to go over what's new. So in SSIS version 20.3, a new data integrity report will be implemented along with several data cleanup messages, all designed to increase the agency's ability to locate the children in placement. The messages will display either on the business organization or the child in placement in different situations, but only when the BizOrg provider does not have a current physical location address with a valid county selected. If you bring this PowerPoint presentation up on your computer, there's a link to a job aid that was created by the SSIS Business Operations Unit that goes over this information in more detail. So here's just an image of the location of the new data integrity report for child placement providers without a physical location address. And that's going to be in Tools, General Reports under Data Integrity Reports. Three new data cleanup messages for child placement providers. The messages will display either on the BizOrg or the child in placement as indicated by previous slides for different situations, but only when the business organization provider does not have a current physical location address with a valid county selected. And here are the data cleanup messages that will appear in those various circumstances. A new business organization index card is available next to the BizOrg provider field on the placements, locations, and absences screen. When clicked, it displays an index card with child placement provider information such as SSIS business organization number, county vendor number, Lindex license number, current physical location address, BizOrg status, status date, voucher method, etc. The original index card remains unchanged and displays the current payment address and is found on the fiscal related screens like payments and service arrangements. This addition makes the provider's current physical location address easier and quicker to access. We have a new pregnant and parenting youth screen, which is under the new pregnant and parenting youth folder under participant. This is required by the Adoption and Foster Care Analysis and Reporting System, otherwise known as AFCARS. This screen is for youth aged 10 years and older in a continuous placement with a start date on or after September 1st, 2020 that are either currently open or have closed within the last 370 days and were open for 30 days or longer. There are questions associated with the screen, as there are with any other screen in SSIS. Has the youth ever fathered or bore a child? You will select yes if the individual is a female and has given birth to a child, or individual is male and is the biological father of the child. You will select no if the individual has not given birth to a child, nor is the individual the biological father of a child. If this question is answered no, and there is at least one birth parent or child relationship where this youth is the parent entered on the relationship screen, a data cleanup message would be generated. If this question is answered yes, then the question is the youth parenting one or more of the biological children becomes enabled and required. Thought I saw some questions here. Okay, looks like Shauna is, thank you, Shauna. Is the youth parenting one or more of their biological children? There are indicators for yes or no. Again, each one of these questions is equipped with help text, and that help text is included in this presentation, and you can take a look at it after our presentation today. My goal today is to orient you to this new folder and the screen itself. Is the youth pregnant is a required question on this screen. In the dropdown, it's yes, no, or unable to determine. And if the answer to that question is yes, then there needs to be an expected due date in the expected due date field. And then finally on this screen, we have a last reviewed date. The worker will click the dropdown and select the appropriate date from the date picker, or they can manually enter that information. There is also a comments section on this screen that you can enter additional information. And that information may include, but is not limited to, an explanation of why the pregnancy ended, or an explanation of why the individual is not parenting one's child. RTF document placement headers are now going to be disabled for local agencies on state documents. And the next couple slides just list the state documents that will no longer allow a state header. And you can take a look at those at your leisure. A new data cleanup message will display at the person level related to removal, adoptions, and TPLPC history node. Date of the most recent finalized adoption prior to the current continuous placement is required. This will not prevent a work group from closing. And the help description on data cleanup will read, date of the most recent finalized adoption prior to the current continuous placement is required for AFCARs. Enter date of the most recent finalized adoption prior to the current continuous placement in the removal adoption TPLPC history screen. The minor parent assessment and service plan replaces the adolescent parent assessment and service plan. The external documents link is updated with the new blank service plan. Existing adolescent parent assessment and service plans can be copied to the new service plan. There was one fiscal update for SSIS version 20.3, and that was merely taking the collateral contact option out for T2023, and then Service 490, Child Rule 79 Case Management for mental health. We have Kelly Klein with us today, who's been sitting by patiently. So if you have any questions about the following screens, we have her here to explain policy or answer any questions that I might not be able to answer. So we have some updates for SSIS adult protection. The adult maltreatment report will have a new field labeled Mark Received Date. This new information will contain Mark Call Center Received, When the MARC call center received the report, the field along with a county receive date field are now displaying on the printed report as well. And the MARC receive date on both the screen and printed report display blank for any existing adult maltreatment reports. Just some minor adjustments in the way things are written on some of the screens. DHS licensing would like agency workgroup number referenced the same way across all of the SSIS DHS licensing screens. So it used to be agency workgroup number with lowercase WG, and now it will be agency capital W, capital G number. The intake start date and time and workgroup tab fields start date and time are disabled for editing when the intake originates in MARC call center. For example, intake type is adult maltreatment. Yes, Cindy, Melissa Vonksy is still with adult protection in a different capacity. So the contacts are Kelly Klein and Angelo Flowers. Then the transfer log now includes a menu option for view call center report that opens a PDF document of the originally received MARC call center maltreatment report. The PDF document is also accessible via a new adult maltreatment report tree view node labeled transfer and the menu option view call center report. The PDF document is only available for adult maltreatment reports received after MARC call center received version 20.3. So you won't see any previous maltreatment reports in PDF format prior to the version release that is going out next Wednesday.
Eric, can I make a few comments on this one?
Yeah.
Okay, the purpose of the new PDF is to allow them at the county level to keep the original MARC report intact. That's a quality assurance, and it's really a chain of evidence that goes into the report. I shouldn't say evidence, but whenever you make changes in the report, MARC gets the original report, not any changes that there are made. So that's really important. So when one of the workers bounce a report back to MARC, remember to alert them that any changes they have done within the MARC report will not go back to the MARC Center or the new LIA. The next thing is the reason we put this in, this will allow you guys to move more frequently to make changes in order to properly screen the report. Potentially, the county APS workers are the experts to change the allegations, the names, etc. in the intake work group. We also created this PDF to protect the data privacy of this report and also allow it to be used with data privacy requests. So when you print this, it will redact certain areas that are covered by data privacy. And please remind your workers that any changes made within the intake work group must be entered into case notes so that it's tracked accordingly as well. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you, Kelly. And then the final screen for the update for adult protection services in SSIS is that the vulnerable adult maltreatment investigation summary document now correctly includes complete statutory references for the allegations and vulnerable adult sections. Existing versions of this document cannot be copied forward. This document does not need a local agency header. You can visit the adult protection FAQ on our SSIS adult protection training site for information on what needs to be done on the vulnerable adult maltreatment investigation summary if your agency is completing that.
Can I make another comment?
Of course.
One of the things that we have seen with investigation summaries that you as mentors could bring back to the county workers is that the workers are responsible to select the appropriate statutory reference that has now been entered in full. And if a statutory reference is not applicable to that case, they need to remove it. So for example, if the case is only for financial exploitation, they would remove the other maltreatments, the statutory definitions for those other maltreatments that are part of that. It's a working tool, so they have a lot of edit capabilities within this tool, and we wanted to make sure that mentors know that those areas should be removed. The problem is if you don't remove them, you're sending those definitions out to potentially vulnerable adults and alleged persons responsible for maltreatment or alleged perpetrators, and that creates confusion for them, because if it's not applicable, then it should be removed. Thanks, Eric.
You're welcome. Thank you. So that concludes this portion of the coffee talk. Does anybody have any questions about the new information that was included in this presentation today? We should have a Jeopardy theme song while we wait for the Q&A. Cindy writes, can we view this meeting at a later time? Heidi, would you like to address that?
Hi there. So sorry it took me a minute to get myself unmuted. We have been recording all sessions. However, due to accessibility features we need to have added to the recordings, we have not been able to release those yet. But we are hoping to have that done soon, and then we'll be able to post those out on the resources page. Real quick, if I may, I'd like to plug our next coffee talk, which is going to be September 29th. And we will be having Jody joining us again for MAPCY post-permanency. Registration details are in the SSIS update. And if anybody else needs the link, please feel free to email me directly. I'll put my email address in the chat. So feel free to reach out at any time I can be of assistance. And I don't know, we'll keep you posted on the recording. And hopefully, like I said, hopefully that'll be pretty soon. We will have that taken care of. But anyway, guess I can't think of anything else, but hopefully that'll help. And again, I'll include that information in the chat. And we will also be following up with additional handouts from Molly and Melissa's presentation, as well as maybe answering a few other questions that are still out there. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us for another coffee talk. We realized that this one was a little bit more lengthy, but contains some great nuggets of information. And hopefully the presentations can be used to help guide your work. You also have access to the SSIS help desk, as well as our fiscal SMEs, Molly and Melissa. And you have the contact information for Jody McElroy, who is our worker side policy expert. And with that being said, we want to thank everybody for participating, and we will see you next time. Thank you.